I was 6, 7 when the diagnosis was made, and my primary language was Vietnamese. So I got lost in like these complex medical words. I think as a child, you don't understand the gravitas of it, nor do you understand like how it affects your life. My parents were pretty confused about the whole thing. I think NF2 at the time, and even now, is a rare and not very well-known genetic disorder. And so they tried to follow up on the literature and read, but it was a lot of confusing things. My mom was the one that was coordinating all my doctor's appointments. She was the one that was really like pushing a lot for my care. And then my dad was also the one like comforting me and really guiding me along. I felt like because of my parents, I had more or less a normal childhood where like the disease was like something that was there, but wasn't something that we always focused on. I think having a very optimistic perspective, especially with dealing with any chronic disease, especially NF2, where things are so unpredictable, realizing that, you know, there are things that we can change and things we can't change. And for the things we can't change, worrying about them, having like a very negative attitude doesn't really help your cause. And so that's more or less the perspective I've tried to carry. NF2 was what kind of like propelled me into medicine, and I think that was really the catalyst for me pursuing a career in like medicine and pediatric hematology oncology or neuro-oncology. It brings a whole like new shade of empathy where you're able to not necessarily put yourself in their position, but bring your own experience to the table and know what that feels like. Everyone's talking about a cure, like a final all cure. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think a lot of the therapies will start with like basic science, clinical research, and it's great to see a lot of nonprofits helping to drive the innovation and the change. If we can get to like the endpoint, great. But if not, I think the small victories are also a huge point in driving the field forward. I really wish I had known about CTF younger. The family and support is tremendous. That understanding between people who go through the same lived experience was just like tremendous for me.
Good morning, everyone. Here we are at the last day of our NF Summit for 2023. Hasn't it been an absolutely outstanding week? Yeah. Again, I'm your co-chair, along with Chris Mortel, Heather Thompson, and it's just been a privilege to have the opportunity to speak with all of you today and throughout the week and meet many of you and hear your stories and share in your experiences. So I have a couple of housekeeping items, so welcome to our final day. We encourage you to keep visiting our learning wall and our exhibit hall. We've had several winners for our passport contest, and there'll be 10 more winners today. Also, thank you for remembering to ask your questions at the microphone, because this allows our captioners to do their jobs and hear you clearly. And you know how much we've been talking about clear communication all week, right? All right, so as we turn our final day, it's about quality of life. I want to point out that at 10 o'clock, there's 3 sessions that you can see in the agenda in the Whova app. Palomino 4 and 5, this room, Palomino 1 and 2, and Palomino 3, which you can find at the end of the exhibit hall. And we know it can be hard to decide which sessions to attend, but we want to remind everyone that they'll be recorded and then uploaded and available within 48 hours of this presentation or of this conference. And so at this point, I am so pleased to welcome Amanda Bergner to the stage. I've had the chance to work with Amanda through RAINS and through previous projects, and I think we're all so excited to hear her speak today. So Amanda Bergner, come on up and welcome. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Let's do that again together. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the reminder. My name's Amanda Bergner, and we'll be spending the next 45 minutes or so together talking about mental health and well-being, what it means and why it matters. So I wanted to start off just sharing a little bit about myself. I'm a genetic counselor by training. I've been in practice for more than 20 years now and have been seeing from the start of my career people that are living with NF and schwannomatosis. So a couple decades of experience there, specifically in clinical care, research, advocacy, and therapeutic development. So I helped to co-found the Johns Hopkins Comprehensive NF Center in 2003, which now feels like a very long time ago. As well as co-founding NTAP with Jayshree Blakely, and I'm now at Columbia University NF Clinic in New York City, and as well have been attending Camp New Friends for about a decade, working with kiddos who have NF that are attending Camp New Friends. And I work with them often around mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and small groups. We talk about genetics and inheritance. We talk about responsibly using social media. We talk about self-esteem and resilience, which sort of brings me to the other part of my expertise. I'm also trained in grief and loss and family dynamics, in adaptation to chronic disease and disability, as well as yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda. And I have just very, very recently, this is a brand new initiative, founded Live Well NF this year to help try to combine some of these things that I've been working on for the last several decades. So more to come on that in the coming months. So why are we talking about mental health and well-being this morning? Well, the answer is actually you all. So my understanding is that last year at the summit, there was this very fun game that Alexion put out with a bunch of ping pongs and fish bowls, and people could come by and vote on a topic that they wanted to hear by dropping a ping pong ball in a fish bowl. And I think it looked a little different than this. This was the best picture I could find, but it sounded like far and away, people voted to hear about mental health. And so that feedback has been put into action this year by CTF and the NF Summit folks. So this is really for you all. So just a quick overview of what we're going to do this morning. We're going to talk about mental health, why it's important, why it matters, and begin to explore some of the key dimensions of mental health and well-being. We'll think some about strengths that we all have and areas that each of us might need a few more resources in our own lives, and then maybe even work towards developing some individualized next steps. So I'm going to be joined by my brainy friend here on a couple slides. This is our try it out. We're actually going to try a couple of things this morning together. So when you see our little meditating brain, we're going to try something out that maybe you've done before and maybe you haven't. So thank you for coming along on that ride with me today. So the first one is a take time for yourself. Really, this is a reminder for us. You all got up, got here, you're here, and you want to be here for the next stretch. So really, to be totally present for this session, if you want to put your phone on silent, if you want to put it away, if there are other things that you feel like might distract your attention from just spending this next 45 minutes for yourself and really being present for yourself. Okay, so what is mental health? Probably if we all answered that question, we'd have a bit of a different answer. We generally think about the phrase mental health not as a single thing, but as an umbrella term. So this can encompass a lot of different things, maybe emotional and social and psychological well-being. We know that it encompasses how we feel about ourselves, our ability to enjoy everyday life activities. And we know that mental health can affect every aspect of our lives in different ways, how we make choices, maybe how we carry out our responsibilities in the world, how we handle stress and worries that are part of normal life, maybe how we maintain our relationships with our family, our friends, our coworkers, and certainly navigating work and school life as well. We also know that mental health is important at every stage of life, so from childhood through adolescence, adulthood, and into later adulthood as well. So for most people, and for all of us, it's quite normal to have times where there are difficult emotions, and that's a very typical, normal part of life. We're going to have some ups and some downs, and for most of us, these feelings are temporary and don't cause any long-term problems. Our mental health and well-being can help to buffer us through these difficult times. When we invest in ourselves, we have a little bit more reserves in the bank that we can use when times get harder. So I really like this stress cloud. We could all probably relate to this. Sometimes there's a lot that builds up, and there are a lot of things that are feeling like pressures on us and in our lives. But again, a lot of this is relatively normal. We know that some amount of stress in life is actually healthy for us. We just want to be sure it doesn't get to the point where it's too much. So as we talk about mental health, it's really important to distinguish mental health from mental illness. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably, but they're actually quite different. So mental health is your general state of mind and well-being, something that you need to be looking after and taking care of. This is sort of our stability and our general state. Mental illness is actually a medical term for a condition that might disrupt that normal general state of mind that we have. These can be disruptions that interrupt your feelings, your thoughts, your behaviors, and there can be medical terminology that goes along with mental illness, including, for example, depression, anxiety, or maybe bipolar disorder. This is really different from mental health, and today we're going to focus on mental health. How do we invest in our sort of general state of mind and what keeps us stable through the ups and downs of life? So why does this matter? We know that there are a lot of benefits of good mental health. Certainly, we've seen through lots of research that good mental health can reduce anxiety and risks of depression. We know that it can improve our moods. We might have a greater inner sense of peace. Our thinking can be clearer. We feel better about ourselves. We enjoy improved relationships. I don't know how many of us can see something up here that we'd like to try to have a little more of in our life. I certainly can myself even. And we also know that mental health matters because our bodies and our minds are not separate from each other. So good mental health can have a direct and positive effect on physical health, and vice versa, the opposite's true. So poorer mental health can have a negative effect on physical health. And we think a lot about this in the setting of living life with NF or schwannomatosis because this can lead to various complications or maybe procedures. Maintaining good physical health is particularly important. And so we really want to think about how our mental health can help support that and not detract from that as well. We know that when our mental health suffers, it's harder to enjoy a balanced and rewarding life. We can feel run down mentally and physically. And so really all of us can benefit from learning how to enhance and protect our mental health. We all experience stressful times, and particularly living with a chronic condition. We know that chronic disease and disability adds additional stressors on top of what we think of as the normal ups and downs of life. In fact, we know that people living with chronic disease and disability report frequent mental distress about 5 times more often than other people. This is a very short excerpt of probably a very long list of things that can introduce difficulties and stressors in living life with NF and schwannomatosis: unpredictability of symptoms, variability and severity of symptoms, certainly vulnerability to stigmatization. And we also know that separate from those, there may be some biological factors that contribute to an increased risk for anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem and or body image, differences in our social relationships, difficulties in school, and some differences in behavior. And so all of this taken together is really a reason for us to be thinking a lot about how we can best maintain, again, and add to that general state of really stable and good, strong mental health. Perhaps some of you all are not living life yourself with NF or schwannomatosis, but might be living life as a caregiver to somebody who's living with NF or schwannomatosis. And there certainly are added burdens for people who are caregivers. Daily life can be full of emotional triggers. It might be difficult to navigate the health system. It can be strenuous to transition from inpatient to home care, maybe hard to access treatments or therapies. Sometimes there can be challenging communications with healthcare providers and health insurance companies. We probably all could raise our hands around that, I'm guessing. There's also a long-term commitment to caregiving, and it can be time-intensive and round the clock sometimes. There can be a physical strain that comes along with it, especially as people get a little bit older, and certainly an emotional toll in terms of anticipatory anxiety and grief. So we know that no matter what our relationship is within the NF and schwannomatosis community, that really bolstering our mental health can be positive for all of us. So again, nobody experiences perfect mental health or well-being all the time. We all are going to have ups and downs. And we all have to learn how to balance the different aspects of our lives. When things in our life change, we have to reestablish the balance. We might have some smaller ups and downs and some larger ups and downs. But ongoing mental distress can really take a toll on your well-being. So that's what we're going to focus a bit on this morning. So I really would like this message to come through too, that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So lots of people will take care of physical health before they feel sick, right? We eat well, we exercise, we try to get enough sleep. We're really putting some deposits in the bank of our physical health so that when we need it, it's there for us. And we can actually take the same approach to mental health. We can make some small deposits along the way so it's there for us when we need it and we have a time of more heightened stress. So let's try it out. So just take a moment. Part of increasing our connection with our own mental health is really starting to increase our connection with ourselves. So in whatever way you'd like to, we'll take about 30 seconds and maybe just check in with yourself and see just how am I feeling today. There's a little scale on the bottom of this picture here. You might come up with a different word on your own. It doesn't matter what answer you're getting back when you ask yourself that question, but just take a moment. So a lot of the tools that we can use to help support ourselves don't have to take a long time either, but beginning to establish this way of maybe checking in a couple times throughout the day. Well, how am I feeling now? How am I feeling now? And really starting to get a little more in tune with what's happening for ourselves. So let's talk a little bit more about how we can cultivate our mental health and well-being. There are, I think, 8 pretty well-defined dimensions of mental health and wellness. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of them this morning. This is a pictorial that we'll use here. And we'll go through each of them just very briefly here. So the first is emotional, and this really means coping effectively with life and creating satisfying relationships. It's a kind of an umbrella of what we're thinking about when we think about the emotional aspect of mental health and well-being. Mental health is also comprised of occupational wellness, so your own satisfaction and enrichment derived from whatever work you do in the world. That could be paid or unpaid, volunteer or not. This could be work inside the home, work outside the home. But whatever you're doing, how satisfied are you with that? And how enriched do you feel in the work that you're doing? We also think about the intellectual dimension of mental health, so recognizing our own creative abilities, finding ways to expand our knowledge and skills and sharing that with others. So maybe thinking, well, how much am I sort of tapped into the intellectual part of my well-being? And how connected am I with that? The fourth dimension is environmental. So this is really what's happening around us and trying to figure out how we can most often occupy spaces that feel pleasant and stimulating to us, and so that our environment is set up in a way that helps to support our well-being. The fifth dimension is financial, so satisfaction with our current and our future financial situations. The sixth is social, thinking about connections, belonging, and a well-developed support system. We also think about the physical dimension of mental health, so recognizing our need for physical activity, diet, sleep, and nutrition. And lastly, the spiritual dimension, which is really different than religion in that spiritual dimension really is thinking a lot about expanding our own sense of purpose and meaning in life. And so these are the defined dimensions of mental health and well-being. We're going to look at a couple of them in a little more detail this morning. But I wanted to start off by saying that all of these dimensions need your attention for you to truly flourish if you think about all of these resources, but they don't have to all be equally sized. We're all different people. We all have different priorities. We have different strengths and different things that really help nourish us. So for some of us, our environment may be much more important for us to focus on to feel well than for others. For other people, it might be the occupational piece really needs to be very well developed and focused on for us to feel really good. And so I put in this stone stacking picture here. This is a favorite hobby of mine. But you kind of get the sense that in order to have balance in your life, all of those dimensions don't have to be the same size, and you don't need to focus on each of them in the same amount. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, where are my Swifties in the audience? Yeah? Okay. What happens when Taylor Swift announces tickets for a new concert tour? What happens to the internet? It breaks, right? Why? Yeah, it's this huge surge of demand at the same exact time because everybody wants the best tickets possible, right? So we think, and I am not an internet person, I hardly should be talking about anything technological. However, I have learned this concept of load balancing. So it's this idea that we've got a bunch of resources. So on the internet, we've got a bunch of servers, and we want to be sure that they're all connected together. So when there's this big surge of demand, we can call on all those servers to help take care of all the clients wanting to buy tickets to see Taylor Swift. So the interesting thing about load balancing on the internet is that you actually don't need to distribute your resources evenly. So you can see that there can still be balance, even if things are not distributed evenly. So I want us to think a little bit about this in terms of our own mental health, those 8 dimensions of mental health and wellness. Maybe they're not balanced evenly, but what we want is to think of those as our servers. Those are our servers, and when there's this big upsurge in demand in our life, we have to kind of pull from these places to be able to meet that demand. And so as you're investing in each of these parts for yourself, you're really getting ready for those times in life where you might need some more resources. So maybe we can shift this idea of load balancing together this morning so that we're not talking quite as much about handling high traffic on a website, but maybe high stress times in life. So let's look a little more closely at a couple of these dimensions, and we'll get into some little more audience participation around this too. So we'll start with emotional wellness. This is a pretty key one. This is the ability to successfully handle life stresses, really be able to adapt to change in difficult times, and to create satisfying relationships for ourselves. So there are probably a variety of ways we can work on this, but one might be developing an awareness of our feelings, checking in with ourselves, really knowing how we respond to everyday interactions, better understand why we're feeling a certain way, and how we want to take care of ourselves around that. The second domain we're going to look a little more closely at is intellectual wellness. So this idea of engaging in creative and mentally stimulating activities. You all may feel like this part of your dimension wheel has gotten nice and full this week with all the things you've been learning about and all the talks you've been going to. So it's not just expanding your own knowledge and skills, but also thinking about how to share your knowledge and skills with others. So how can you really help to bolster this part of your wellness? We're also going to look a little more closely at social wellness, this idea of building and nurturing meaningful and supportive relationships. I'm guessing many of you have been doing that this week also, with individuals, groups, and communities, really developing that sense of connection and belonging and support with others. We can work on that by connecting with other people. We can participate in activities that bring us joy also. And the fourth domain we'll spend a little more time with is spiritual wellness. So again, this isn't a specific religion that you might follow. It's really more about meaning, finding meaning in life events, and defining our own purpose. What are we doing here in this world? So this can stem from your own beliefs, faith, values, ethics, or moral principles that help provide purpose and direction in your life. And we might work on this part of our wellness and mental health by exploring what we think the meaning of different life events are. Really spending time being fully present with ourselves, with others, practicing empathy and compassion, and creating those supportive relationships. So again, each person's healthiest self is different. We have different bodies, different minds and situations and people influencing our lives. We also have different priorities. So as you're working through this exercise, we're going to take a little time. Hopefully people got a worksheet on the way in. I think we have some extras if people don't have one in front of them. And we'll turn the lights up in the room a little bit so that everybody can see what they're up to. And as we get started on this activity, I just want to remind us that as we're cultivating mental health and well-being, this can sometimes be really hard. So sometimes can feel like a physical workout in a way, and that it's taxing and it's difficult. You're using new muscles that you haven't really used before, and you have to grow and develop them. Some of us were raised in ways, like in many generations ago, where this may not have been as talked about or valued, so maybe we didn't get as many skills as we were growing up. Maybe we don't have the language around this. Maybe this is newer to us. Maybe we internalized other messages like mental health doesn't matter. And so this really might mean developing some new muscles and habits, sort of like going to the gym. Okay, so we're going to practice trying it out, another piece of connecting with yourself. So if you feel open to it, you might find one hand over your heart and one over your belly. If you want to close your eyes, you can leave them open and just take a really deep breath and see if you can feel your hands moving as you breathe in and out. Like, just notice where the air is going in your body. See if you can get your breath all the way down into your belly. And use your breath to help link a little bit of space and help connect with yourself just a little further. So if that feels great this morning, keep doing it. If you want to move on, and we're going to try our activity together, you're going to take the worksheets that you have. You should have one page on each of those 4 dimensions of wellness we just talked briefly about. Maybe pick one to start with. So see for yourself, this could be, I'm sort of tired, I've kind of had enough. I'm going to pick the one I think I probably have the most resources already in place. Like, this is probably my strongest one of these 4. Some people may be like, I got 12 hours of sleep, I'm ready, I'm going to pick the one that I actually think might be the hardest for me. And some people might start somewhere in the middle. So just turn to the page that's the one you want to start working on. And you'll find on that page, I just used emotional wellness as an example here, but the very top of the page has a box that asks you to reflect first. There are a handful of examples of what this could look like. So for emotional wellness, if you're on that page, you might see, how often or easily do I take time to myself to quiet my mind? How often do I smile and laugh? There are some things you can sort of reflect on. This is just a start. You can probably think of a lot more that have to do with that dimension. And maybe just first reflect. Just give yourself a moment and think. When you feel ready, you can move down a little bit on the page to the strengths box. So here, start off by listing the strengths you already have in this dimension. If you're not sure quite where to start, I put in a couple of sentence beginners here. I'm good at, it's easy for me to, I have a lot of, and really kind of stay in that dimension that you chose. After you've taken a few minutes to jot down your strengths, you can move on to thinking about a couple things you might choose to improve for yourself in this dimension. So again, if you want some sentence starters, that might be, I could use more, I don't have enough, I want to be able to. And after you've got a couple ideas there, maybe put a star next to the one that feels most important to you this morning. This can change, but just for today. So it might be in the emotional wellness realm, I want to be able to ask for help more often. And then take the next step to think about, what can I actually do this next week to put this into action? And that may look like, I want to ask someone for help with something I would normally try to do all on my own. And see how specific you can be. And we'll come back together in a few minutes. You're welcome to work through, if you get through one and you want to try a second one or a third, that's totally up to you. So if you're somebody that thinks they want to do at least 2, you might think about moving on to the second one. If you're not there yet, we'll just take another minute or 2. Okay, we'll maybe wind up where we are for now. This is something you can take with you and continue to work on if you feel like it's helpful for you to think about it. We'll always encourage you to start with your strengths and think about your strengths first before you start making a list of things that you want to try to improve. That's another way to practice good support for yourself. So another try it out is this idea of establishing relationships and community and connection and being open to someone. So if you wrote something down that you want to try out or something you want to work towards and you feel comfortable turning to somebody near you and telling them what you chose to work on briefly, that's fine. If you feel like this is personal and for me, maybe spend a moment thinking about, well, who can I tell my specific goal to or my goals, things I want to work on after I leave the talk today. And maybe just think about, like, how can I say this out loud to somebody or by text, and how can I kind of put my intention out into the world a little bit more and be open with somebody. So if you want to take a moment, feel free. All right, well, maybe we'll take another 15 or 20 seconds to finish up our thoughts. Okay, and we'll begin to wind back together. Maybe these are seeds of conversations you all can choose to continue throughout the day today. I think the whole day is focused on improvement around quality of life and really making those connections, thinking for ourselves what's going to be of value, and really thinking about for our community what will be of value. So how many people, especially maybe coming out of the uber intense years of the pandemic, have seen these tips for mental health and well-being? And there's a little list of all these things you're supposed to do to feel better. Does Are people familiar with those? Like, what kinds of things do people suggest? Elevator? Oh, I don't know that one.
I've seen people do an elevator. I've seen people reference using an elevator to show where you're at, and that it's very easy to transition up and down that elevator of your moods or your mental health.
Right, so maybe using that analogy of an elevator about our mental health in terms of the fact that it can go up and down and it can move pretty easily sometimes. Yeah. What else have people seen? What other things have people heard about that can help support mental health? Oh, what things people have heard about that can help support mental health and well-being? Like, what's a tip that people have gotten? What kinds of things can help support that?
Tactical breathing, or any like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like counting backwards, 5 things you see, 4 things, yeah, those kind of things.
Yeah, so deep breathing and quieting your mind.
This isn't very concrete, but when you talk about things that have kind of emerged out of the pandemic, there's been a lot of talk around establishing and trying to maintain boundaries with people working from home, and sometimes in spaces with children, and just the challenges that people have had and are still having around that.
Yeah, so sort of restructuring our daily lives and thinking about where our boundaries are, that might be really, maybe we need some work on the environmental dimension of our mental health and wellness. What's happening around us at any given time, and how do we structure that well for ourselves?
Meditation and visualization, I found, can help a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not the best at taking time for it, I'll be honest, but I need to get better, because I know it definitely helps me.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that and also sharing your own experience with it. I think you're not alone. It is difficult for probably many of us to make the space, but once we're there, we can find it is really helpful. So visualization, meditation, sort of calming and quieting our mind a bit.
Surrounding yourself with positive and uplifting people and absorbing their energy.
Yeah, so again, that environmental piece, what's happening around us? Are we surrounded by people that are generally positive and can offer us some of that uplifted energy when we might need it? Yes. Yeah, thank you.
There's an emotional wheel online you can use to find happy, sad, and figure out your feelings. And it's really beneficial for me. But you can find it online. It's called an emotional wheel.
Yeah, thank you. The feelings wheel, and really developing our vocabulary around our feelings. So how do I even name the thing that's going on for me? What's it called? How am I feeling right now? Thank you.
For me, probably the most effective is somebody who spends a lot of time wound up in tense and don't even realize it, doing progressive muscle relaxation and working through every single muscle group of my body, relaxing my finger, relaxing my toes, really takes you to a lower level.
Yeah, thank you. That physical dimension of our well-being and our mental health, and really sort of being able to relax, because a lot of us can get tight and all of a sudden our shoulders are at our ears and we're walking around like that, and we can relax a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
One of the things I thought of was putting away technology, putting away social media, really taking a break and being where you are, seeing the surroundings and things like that.
Yeah, so maybe again clearing that space for ourselves with some of the things that we can often be distracted by, and making that space for ourselves. Thank you. Yeah.
One of the things that I found kind of incidentally in myself, and the more research that I did, that really promotes the sense of well-being and a feeling of health is intermittent, or is cutting out all the bad foods, the fast foods, the sodas, the processed foods, the high sugar foods, all those things. I had a great success with intermittent fasting, and when I lost 50, 60 pounds, I hadn't felt that good since I was 20 years old. I felt amazing, not just physically, but my mental health, my patience, my overall feeling of well-being. And the more research I did, the more I found that really cutting out all these horrible foods, the fast foods, the McDonald's, all those things, really makes a tremendous impact on your sense of feeling well.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm hearing for you that physical dimension of well-being has really made such an important impact on your overall mental health. Like we talked about, our mind and body are not separate. So thank you, yeah. Maybe let's do one more.
The best thing I've ever done for my mental health is do a DBT group, dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the tips is called the TIP skill, which is temperature, intense exercise, and paced breathing, and that kind of includes a lot of different ones that we've talked about. The temperature one is especially for when you're in a moment of high anxiety. You can splash your face with like really cold water, and it just forces your body to take a deep breath, and it can be very helpful. But everybody should do DBT because it's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I think you're also bringing up a great point that we have these general things we can practice across every day of our life, and then we can have some of those tools in our tool belt of like, we have a blip on the screen. I need something now that's a little bit more immediate as well. So we have kind of a combination of ways that we can help support our mental health. Yeah, these are great ideas, and you all can tell everybody was offering different things from different dimensions of the wellness wheel that we looked at. And so again, everybody's going to need something a little bit different. So as you think about your balance, there may be one part of the dimension wheel that needs to be really big for you at that given point, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that you're out of balance. It can be a different balance for everybody. It depends on who you are and what you need then. So we tried out a few things today. We just heard a bunch of great ideas for ways that we can continue to support different dimensions of our mental health. And I want us to remind each other and ourselves that you've each created maybe some own action items for yourself. You can really be thinking about how to take this out of today into your life moving forward. But I want to remind you not to forget about the other dimensions of mental health and well-being. So remember, there were 8 on our wheel. We looked at 4 maybe a little bit more specifically, but there are 4 others. And so be sure that as you're thinking about how am I going to kind of tune this up and really pay attention to it so that I'm in the best place possible, that you're looking at all of those dimensions for yourself. So we'll begin to start to wind down for today, but really thinking about what if I need more support? So we all have times of mental distress. This is a normal part of life, and our general state of mind is going to help buffer us through those times. Most are temporary, and mostly we can rebound. But what happens if that's not happening? What happens if we aren't able to rebound as well? What if it's so much stress, it's sort of overwhelming our resources? So I want to introduce this graphic here so we think a little bit about when should I talk to a healthcare provider or somebody about my mental health. And thinking about excelling in this dark green with thriving in the lighter green. As we get a little more stressed, we're surviving. A little more, we're struggling, and a little more than that, maybe we're in crisis. So you might think about, okay, well, there are going to be times where I'm just kind of getting by and putting one foot in front of the other, but if that's really lasting me for more than about 4 weeks, I might want to think about talking to somebody. And if I get to the point where I'm in the orange and I'm really struggling, and that lasts longer than about 2 weeks, I might want to talk to somebody. And if you're ever finding yourself in red or in crisis, that's definitely a time as well. But I'm going to put in a plug to maybe have us all think about not waiting until we're in crisis, but maybe starting to be able to tell, because we're working on connecting with ourselves, when do I get into that orange? When am I getting a little more into the orange and a little more into that yellow? And I kind of want to really start to pay a little more attention to this for myself. So then who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? So certainly a primary doctor or provider, whatever that is like for you, a pediatrician, an internist, maybe it's a family medicine practitioner. You certainly can talk to counselors, therapists that you have connections with. Some people have a great network through their insurance company as well. I think one of the questions that often comes up too is, how do I actually go about talking about this? So I know maybe I want to reach out, but what do I say? What do I do? So it's best if you can make an appointment and let people know why you're calling. You don't need to try to hang on to it or have some other reason for seeing your doctor. It's okay to say, I've just been feeling an immense amount of stress. I'm really struggling and I need to see my doctor and talk about this. Really encouraging you to be honest and open if that's the case as you're reaching out. And try to get specific about the things you're noticing. I've been having trouble falling asleep, or I'm sleeping a whole bunch, or I'm not really eating the same way. I don't enjoy the same activities that I used to, and it's been many weeks that I've felt that way. Maybe when did it start as well? Definitely ask questions of your healthcare provider, for sure. And sometimes people say, can I talk to my NF provider about my mental health? And what I would say is not only can you, but you should. This is a critical part of your health, and your NF healthcare team is there to support you. And so really thinking about how to incorporate this into your overall NF care as well. Especially if you're being seen in an NF Clinic Network clinic site, there are experts at these centers that certainly understand the whole realm of life and health, mental and physical health that can be impacted by NF and schwannomatosis. So I wanted us to close today with one more practice to try it out, which is to either practice your choice, gratitude or affirmations. So you might spend a moment saying to yourself or writing down, I'm really grateful for fill in the blank. Or you might decide to practice affirmations, and if you need a little help with that, there are some really great ones on the board outside. I snapped a couple of pictures because I love that out there. So you can kind of get a sense of what people are saying. I made a friend, you're brave, you're strong, I met so many warriors, be yourself, and you can do this. These are all fantastic examples of affirmations that can also really help remind us and kind of stabilize that overall mental health when we use affirmations. So maybe take a moment and think of an affirmation for yourself or something that you're grateful for. I also really love this, so I decided that this is maybe where we would close. When I thought I wasn't beautiful, I realized I was beautiful all along. What a fantastic affirmation. So definitely take time out to appreciate yourself, appreciate others around you. That can add a lot to this overall experience of wellness. Be kind to your mind. So I think we have a few minutes for questions if people want to come up to the microphone. I'm also happy to hear from anyone by email in the coming weeks.
Any questions?
Or anybody else that wants to share great ideas for tips around mental health is fine too. You all are a great resource to each other too. Okay, well, we have a question here. I'm also happy to hang around after.
So you said you were you just formed a mental wellness organization? Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, it's at its very early stages, so really thinking about a little bit more, getting connected with what people living with NF and schwannomatosis could really utilize and benefit from and be helpful. I think I think it's been really clear to a lot of us for a while that it's difficult to always find outlets and find support for the things that you need. I think when I see patients and families in clinic, they often ask for resources outside of the hospital, but people that really know about NF, and it's difficult sometimes to find counselors or therapists or other sources of support where people know about the condition as well. And so I think at this point that for me has sort of been the basis of thinking about what could be really beneficial for the community. So it's at very early stages, but if you've got great ideas about things that you all think could be helpful, I'm also happy to hear about those as well. So yeah, more to come on that.
Would 988 be a good number and resource for people to use?
I'm sorry?
The 988 number.
The 988 number. Would you elaborate on that? Would you mind to share a little more with everyone?
Okay. It's the National Suicide Hotline,
Mm-hmm.
and they have offered a great resource to talk at any time for anything and anyone. It's a good resource for someone just to listen or to talk to if you're having those feelings.
Yeah, right in the moment.
In the moment,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
First, I want to say thank you. I think every single one of us within AF struggle with the mental health part of it, just our health and well-being. And also, Lena and I were just talking, the anxiety and sometimes depression that people don't see on the inside. And Kate and I were talking about this last night. As a schwannomatosis patient, I look so normal on the outside. So people think, and for me, I'm athletic and I work out, and that's my emotional stability. As I tell people, I run my crazy off. But, so I think mental health is very, very important and needs to be part of our organization in order for all of us to get the resources we need. And so I just want to say thank you for that. I thank, CTF for bringing you in and for you really, doing the Live Well NF. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think this is all a journey we're on together. I think helping each other out and supporting each other, whatever strengths, expertise, and gifts we each have to offer. Yeah, thank you.
So I've got a question for you. If somebody is in just a straight downward spiral, going down that rabbit trail of dark thoughts and, when you're all alone and you have nobody to talk to, is there a way physically, mentally, emotionally that you would suggest to snap ourselves out of this? I've heard people pop in a rubber band on their wrist to assist in that physical aspect of snapping us out. But do you have any suggestions for that?
That's a great question, and I wonder if for everybody, as you mentioned, people make different suggestions, and when we try them, sometimes they work for us and sometimes they don't, because we're each a bit different. And so I think that's that piece of sort of personal exploration of what's going to work for me and what is going to be helpful to me. And that might be different because the underlying reason that that's happening is a little bit different as well. And it might be a little bit more of a longer conversation, because I'm not sure actually that there is often like a quick fix for some of the things that we experience that happen for us repeatedly, that sometimes those sort of quick answers are maybe temporarily help us shortly, but that we would want a little bit more relief in the long term. I wonder if we could chat for a few minutes after. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
So I just wanted to share what I do when I have really bad days. It's gonna sound silly, but I tend to cuddle on my couch with my dog and watch 18 hours of Law and Order. SVU, to be specific. And I also go see my cousins. They're 8 and 10, and they are my world. They're not my kids, but they are my world. So I take them to the movies and take them out and have fun with them. And I get them addicted to Law and Order as well.
Yeah, I am too. I'm a little preferential to the totally straight up traditional Law and Order, but I hear SVU is what works for you. So yeah, I can share
I have
that.
Detective Stabler on my phone. So.
Well, I think you bring up good examples of how we can lean on our community. Nieces, nephews, cousins, families, pets, other people even characters in TV shows and movies that we really like can become part of our community in many ways. We can lean on that when we're having that stressful time. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. I hope, let's take one more, and then I hope the conversation will just continue out into the hallway and in future weeks.
Is this one on? Okay, great. Amanda, wonderful talk. Thank you so much for putting it on. I think mental health is so important. I'm a psychologist. I see another fellow psychologist here as well, and CTF has always really had an interest in the whole person and that whole experience. So as a shameless plug, I just wanted to say there is a CTF-funded website. It was actually funded through 4 different organizations called www.nf-web.org. You can check it out. There's an 8-week program that has some mental health-related topics.
Great.
And my wonderful face. So you can. It's a program that was actually funded by CTF. So it's not a cure-all by any means, but it is a few resources that could be helpful for mental health.
Thank you. Fantastic.
www.nf-web.org, and it's from my group at Mass General Hospital.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and
yes,
thank you, Amanda.
Enjoy the rest of the day. Be well.